Hello everyone. Welcome to the podcast, where we explore in a whole new way. Let's dive into the exciting world of podcasts, where each video brings knowledge and unforgettable experiences. Many years after she left me and our children to run away with her lover, she suddenly appeared at my doorstep, her eyes full of despair, carrying a child that wasn't mine. What she said next turned my life upside down once again. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell so you don't miss any new updates. Now, let's get started. I still remember the first time I laid eyes on Angela. We were both in our mid-20s, working at the same firm, her in marketing and me in sales. She had this spark, an energy that drew people in, myself included. Within a few months, we were dating, and 2 years later, we were married. Life seemed perfect. We bought a small house in a quiet suburb, close enough to the city but far enough away to enjoy some peace. The kind of place where you could raise a family, and that's exactly what we did. Our first daughter, Emily, was born a year into the marriage, and it felt like the missing piece of our life had finally clicked into place. Angela was a natural mother, caring, patient, and loving. But 2 years later, when she found out she was pregnant again, everything changed. The second pregnancy wasn't planned. I'll never forget the day she sat me down, her face tense, and told me the news. I was excited, but Angela wasn't. She made it clear that she wasn't ready for another child, and the months that followed were filled with tension. Despite that, when our second daughter, Sophie, arrived, I thought maybe things would settle. They didn't. Angela's behavior shifted drastically after Sophie's birth. She became irritable, detached, and emotionally distant, not just from me, but from the girls too. I tried to be understanding, figuring it could be postpartum depression or just the stress of handling 2 young children. I stepped up as much as I could, working longer hours to cover our expenses and then coming home to take care of the house and kids. It wasn't easy. Angela had completely withdrawn, both physically and emotionally. She stopped contributing to the household, not even the small things like tidying up or cooking a meal. The strain became unbearable, and I finally hired a housekeeper to help manage the chores, even though it stretched our already tight finances. Angela barely noticed. I told myself it would pass, that she just needed time. I believed she was going through something that I couldn't fully understand, but it would get better. However, that hope began to fade when months passed with no change in her behavior. The emotional distance between us widened, and the weight of handling everything on my own grew heavier. One evening, after putting the kids to bed, I couldn't hold back anymore. I asked Angela for help, pleading with her to engage with the family again. What started as a calm request quickly spiraled into a heated argument. She became defensive, accusing me of being the cause of our financial struggles, of not providing enough for the family. She resented me for hiring a housekeeper, for making decisions she claimed I didn't consult her on. I didn't recognize the person standing in front of me anymore. Things escalated that night. In the heat of the moment, she shoved me. I fell back, hitting the corner of the coffee table, the pain shooting through my back. It wasn't just the physical injury that hurt. It was the realization that the woman I loved, the mother of my children, had become someone I could no longer trust. That incident marked a turning point. I no longer felt safe around Angela, and more importantly, I no longer trusted her around our daughters. Something had to change, and deep down, I knew this was the beginning of the end. After that night, things between Angela and me became increasingly tense. I tried to be patient, convincing myself that her behavior was due to hormonal changes or even postpartum depression. I read every article I could find on the subject, hoping to understand what was happening to my wife. I suggested she see a doctor or talk to someone, but she refused every time. Angela wouldn't admit that something was wrong. Her disinterest in the household and, more importantly, in our daughters, became more pronounced with each passing day. She avoided spending time with the girls, and when she did, it was only because I asked her to. Emily and Sophie would try to engage her, showing her their drawings or asking her to play, but Angela would wave them off, too distracted by her phone or simply staring off into space. It was heartbreaking to watch. I did everything I could to keep the family functioning, juggling my job, housework, and being there for the kids. It was exhausting, but I kept telling myself that things would get better. I wanted to believe that Angela would snap out of whatever this was, but instead, the emotional distance between us grew. The breaking point came during another argument, one that had been brewing for weeks. I had asked Angela again to help out more at home. I wasn't trying to attack her, just asking for some support. But she exploded, turning the conversation into an attack on me. She blamed me for our financial strain, saying that I wasn't doing enough to provide for the family. She resented me for the housekeeper, claiming I should be able to handle things myself if I was the man of the house. The words cut deep, but I tried to stay calm. I told her I was doing my best and reminded her that we were in this together. But Angela wasn't hearing any of it. Her frustration reached a boiling point, and before I knew it, she shoved me hard. I stumbled back, nearly tripping over the edge of the couch. That was it for me. I couldn't let this continue, not just for my sake but for the girls. I didn't feel safe anymore, and I couldn't trust Angela to be around them in her current state. I had to protect my daughters. We both knew it was time for a serious change. Angela moved in with her parents, agreeing that she needed help. She promised to undergo therapy, but with the condition that she could only return once a doctor confirmed she was stable enough to be around the kids again. I wanted to believe this was the start of something better, that we could save our marriage. I attended marriage counseling on my own, hoping that with time, we could fix what had broken between us. But even as I tried to remain hopeful, part of me feared that things had gone too far. If you think the story is good, leave a comment with the number 1, and if not, please subscribe to the channel. If the video is helpful to you, don't forget to hit the like button. 6 months into our separation, Angela seemed to be making progress. She was attending therapy regularly, or at least that's what she told me. I wanted to believe it, and for a while, I allowed myself to hope. I let her visit Emily and Sophie under my supervision, and during those visits, she seemed more like her old self. She laughed with the girls, listened to them, and even helped with their homework. It was a glimpse of the woman I had married, and for a brief moment, I thought we might actually be able to rebuild our family. But then, almost as quickly as things had seemed to improve, Angela started pulling away again. She stopped going to her counseling sessions and began avoiding my calls. Whenever I tried to talk to her about the next steps for our family, she made excuses, always too busy or too tired to have a serious conversation. I could feel her slipping away, but I didn't know why. Suspicion gnawed at me, and one evening, I decided to stop by her parents' house unannounced. I told myself I was just checking in, but deep down, I knew I was looking for answers. What I found confirmed my worst fears. As I approached the house, I saw them through the window, Angela and Sean, her childhood friend. They were sitting close together on the couch, their heads bent toward one another, whispering. Then, before I could process what was happening, they kissed. It wasn't just a friendly peck on the cheek, this was something more, something intimate. I stood frozen outside, my heart pounding in my chest. I had been so focused on fixing our marriage, on helping Angela get better, that I hadn't even considered the possibility that she had already moved on. And not just moved on, but with Sean, a man I had trusted, someone who had been a part of our lives for years. Devastation doesn't even begin to cover how I felt in that moment. Everything I had been fighting for, all the hope I had clung to, shattered in an instant. Angela had betrayed me in the worst possible way, and there was no coming back from it. I left without confronting them, unable to face the reality of what I had just seen. Instead, I went home, filed for divorce the next day, and assumed full custody of our daughters. Angela didn't fight it. In fact, she didn't seem to care at all. Under pressure from Sean, she signed away her parental rights, effectively abandoning her family. The betrayal cut even deeper when I discovered that my parents had been secretly keeping in touch with Angela. They had allowed her to visit Emily and Sophie without my knowledge, bribing the girls to keep quiet. When I confronted them, they defended their actions, insisting that Angela deserved another chance and that she should be a part of her daughters' lives. That final betrayal was the last straw. I filed restraining orders against both Angela and my parents, determined to protect my children from the toxic influences that had already done so much damage. After discovering the truth about my parents' betrayal, I knew I had to take action. They had crossed a line I could never forgive, allowing Angela access to the girls behind my back. It felt like a final blow in a series of painful revelations, and I realized that I had to protect my daughters at all costs. I confronted my parents one last time, hoping they would understand the damage they had caused. But instead of acknowledging their mistakes, they defended Angela, insisting that she deserved to be a part of her daughters' lives. They believed that I was being too harsh, that I was denying Angela a second chance to make things right. But I couldn't see it that way. The moment Angela walked out on us, the moment she chose Sean over our family, was the moment she forfeited that right. My parents couldn't understand that, and it created a rift between us that couldn't be repaired. I filed restraining orders against both Angela and my parents. It was a difficult decision, but it was necessary. I couldn't allow people who had betrayed my trust to be part of my daughters' lives. Emily and Sophie had already been through enough, and I refused to let them be caught in the middle of more lies and manipulation. With Angela and my parents out of the picture, I focused on rebuilding a sense of normalcy for my daughters and myself. It wasn't easy, but over time, we adjusted. I made sure Emily and Sophie knew they were loved and that I would always be there for them, no matter what. We started attending family therapy to help them process everything that had happened, the separation, their mother's absence, and the emotional manipulation they had endured. Slowly but surely, we began to heal. Angela, on the other hand, continued down her path of self-destruction. I heard through mutual acquaintances that her relationship with Sean had fallen apart, and not long after, she had another child with someone else. She tried to reach out to me several times, especially after her split from Sean, but I refused to engage. She wasn't a part of our lives anymore, and I intended to keep it that way. I had to protect my daughters, and that meant keeping Angela and her chaos far away from us. The restraining orders remained in place, a legal barrier between my past and the future I was building with Emily and Sophie. My parents made a few attempts to reconcile, but I couldn't trust them after what they had done. Their loyalty to Angela, even after all she had put us through, had permanently damaged our relationship. For the sake of my daughter's well-being, I kept my distance. As time passed, I found a new sense of peace. The constant turmoil that had once defined my life was gone, replaced by a quiet strength I hadn't known I possessed. My focus shifted entirely to my daughters and their happiness. They were thriving, despite everything, and seeing them smile and laugh again was all the reassurance I needed that I had made the right choices. Looking back, I realized that the end of my marriage, as painful as it had been, was the beginning of a new chapter. A chapter where I was free from the toxic relationships that had weighed me down for so long. I was finally able to prioritize what mattered most, my daughters and their future. In the months and years that followed, I committed myself fully to being the best father I could be for Emily and Sophie. The restraining orders I had filed against Angela and my parents stood firm, creating the necessary boundaries to protect my daughters from any further emotional manipulation or turmoil. It wasn't easy raising two young girls on my own, but we had found our rhythm, our sense of stability. The girls were my priority, and everything I did from that point forward was for them. Family therapy became a cornerstone of our healing process. At first, Emily and Sophie were confused, hurt by their mother's absence and the secrecy surrounding my parents' betrayal. But with the help of a compassionate therapist, we worked through those emotions together. I encouraged them to be open with me, to talk about their feelings, and I did my best to provide them with the emotional support they needed. It was a long journey, but over time, the wounds began to heal. Angela, meanwhile, had tried several times to make her way back into our lives. She reached out occasionally, sometimes through lawyers, sometimes directly, but I stayed firm in my decision. Her choices had led her down a different path, and I couldn't allow her instability to disrupt the life I was building for our daughters. I wasn't angry anymore, just resolute. Angela had made her decisions, and I had made mine. My focus was, and always would be, on my children's well-being. My relationship with my parents remained distant. They had made their choice when they sided with Angela, and while I tried to understand their perspective, I couldn't forgive the betrayal. Trust, once broken, is hard to rebuild, especially when it involves your children. I couldn't risk exposing Emily and Sophie to any more of the secrets or lies that had caused so much pain in the past. As time passed, our lives grew quieter, more peaceful. The girls thrived in school, making friends, and excelling in their studies. I was proud of them, not just for their accomplishments but for their resilience. They had been through so much, but they came out stronger, and that gave me the strength to keep moving forward. There were moments when I thought about the future, about what life might look like as they grew older. I wondered if they would ever want to reconnect with Angela or with my parents. Those were bridges we would cross when the time came, but for now, I was content knowing that we had built a strong, loving home, one that was free from the toxic influences that had once threatened to tear us apart. I found peace in the routine of our everyday life, in the small moments, making breakfast for the girls before school, helping with their homework, watching movies together on Friday nights. Those were the things that mattered now. My daughters were happy, and that was all I could ever ask for. As I looked toward the future, I felt hopeful for the first time in a long while. The chaos and heartbreak of the past were behind me, and what lay ahead was an open road, one that I could navigate with confidence and clarity. I had learned hard lessons about trust, betrayal, and the importance of setting boundaries. But most importantly, I had learned that I was capable of creating a safe, loving environment for my daughters, one where they could grow and thrive without fear or uncertainty. In the end, that's all that truly mattered. If you think the story is good, leave a comment with the number 1, and if not, please subscribe to the channel. If the video is helpful to you, don't forget to hit the like button.